in July, when all of this is going on, the Poles become more and more nervous. They see what the Soviets are doing. They see basically that they are trying to take over the country, and that there is not supposed to be an independent Poland after the war. The Warsaw Uprising is really the last act of desperation to somehow stop this. When the Warsaw Uprising, so 2 days after this, on July 29th, you have both this radio, Kościuszko, issuing their appeal, this radio station controlled by Moscow, calling for the Poles to rise up. But you also have the first armored units of the Red Army showing up on the outskirts of Warsaw, the absolute outskirts of it. However, they are counterattacked by two German panzer corps, so tank corps, and an intense battle breaks out. Nevertheless, the Poles, they see these approaching Soviet units, and they decide to start the uprising. The decision is taken on July 31st. It is decided that the next day at 5 p.m. The so-called V hour will take place, the hour when the fighting is supposed to start. After the fighting starts, quickly Stalin, despite having earlier made sure that this radio station will call for the Poles to rise up in Warsaw, he quickly issues an order making sure that there are no further Soviet advances near Warsaw. And very soon thereafter, the Soviet tank units in the area stop receiving all forms of fuel, making sure that even if somebody would want to disobey his orders, it simply wouldn't be possible. Quickly also, he starts changing his tune. Initially, he stays silent. He doesn't really want to condemn the Poles that have launched the uprising. But as there is more and more pressure from the Americans and from the British for Stalin to somehow get involved in aiding the uprising, he starts changing his stance, and he says that this uprising was absolutely foolish. It was started by Polish bandits. And
yes, bandits. There are a lot of when the Russians, then Soviet, look at there are a lot of bandits around. They seem to be in constant fear of bandits, whether they're in Warsaw in 1944 or Kiev in 2022.
Bandits, neo-Nazis, Kiev juntas, Warsaw juntas. The names are plenty, and unfortunately, it is this attitude that you have in the Kremlin, and you have always had, that when it comes to the truth, they can bend it in any way they want for it to further their core of action anyway. So in this case, it's absolutely the same. And on August 23rd, the Kremlin issues another order calling on all Red Army units in the area that if they encounter any members of the Polish underground that are heading towards Warsaw, that are trying to aid the Warsaw Uprising, then they need to be disarmed and arrested. So there is definitely no help coming from the Soviets in the first couple of weeks of the Warsaw Uprising. There is a slight change in September, once it becomes more and more apparent that the Warsaw Uprising is failing. Initially, in the first few days, you had large parts of the city being taken, but there were a few key areas, including the bridges across the Vistula River, that remain in German control, and it becomes evident that there is no perspective for a long-term win for the Poles. This is when, in order to mitigate some of the criticism that Stalin is receiving from the Western Allies, he decides to conduct a few airdrops to help the insurgents. However, the parachutes, many of them malfunction, and whatever weapons were dropped, they arrive damaged. Also, you have the Polish First Army under General Zygmunt Berling, who arrive in Warsaw, and they actually enter the district across the river, the Praga district. By September 11th, they have managed to secure control of large parts of that district. And on the 9th of September 14th and 15th, more than 1,000 of them managed to cross the river and link up with the insurgents on the other side of the river. However, this moment was also not great for it, as the insurgents at that moment, they only held on to a very small bridgehead on the riverbank by the Czerniaków-Powiśle area. Initially, during the first weeks of the uprising, the insurgents controlled almost the entire riverbank, so it would have been much easier to cross earlier on if there had been a push towards the Praga district, which wasn't really held by any strong German units at the time. They were fighting against the Soviet Red Army further away from Warsaw, north and south. But in the vicinity of Warsaw itself, and especially on that Praga side, the German units weren't really that strong at all. So if we do contrafactic history, then it would have been a good opportunity to do that crossing earlier on.
Adam, as usual, we've come to the end of the segment, so I'm going to have to ask you to pause there, but we'll pick it up next time. There we are. I've had to interrupt Adam almost in mid-sentence, but fear not, if you join us next time, as we hope you will, we'll continue the story. In the meantime, thank you for watching Poland Daily History, and we look forward to seeing you next time.